Hi, so today I have a fun little exercise for you to do with self-awareness, and I'm going to use a painting to do it. Hi, my name's Christine L. Conroy. Welcome to Happy Stuff and Fluff, a channel for women who are getting happy and growing into the very best version of themselves. And this is part of a series where I'm kind of talking about looking at art or looking at paintings and finding ways that we can do that will help us in our day-to-day living or make art a bit more relative to the average, or relevant, to the average you and me. And so just so that you know, art history is my first degree. And every time I look at art, since I discovered positive psychology, I look at it in this way, trying to find ways to discover how we can use it. So today, I'll leave a link to the first video I did on this subject here, but I'm going to be doing lots more every now and then. And today, the painting we're looking at today, I have to take you back to the 18th century, so I have to give you a little bit of background to it. So in the 18th century, we're talking 18th century England. Now this happened in other countries too, but obviously I'm in England, I'm talking about England here. So what happened was, during the 18th century, it became incredibly popular for the young aristocratic gentlemen to go off on the grand tour of Europe in order to complete their education. At least that was meant to be the reason for it. They would go off around Europe, and they would take an entourage of servants with them. They would also take a tutor along too, who is obviously going to help them to complete their education. And if they were incredibly wealthy, they would take an artist with them, because of course they would want to record their experiences pretty much like we do with a camera. And this was called the Grand Tour. Now, as I say, they went all around Europe with the primary destination of Italy, especially after the excavations of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Italy, Rome in particular, became a very popular destination, so that was the where they would kind of end up, if you like. So off they would go then with their entourage of people, taking an artist with them. But if they couldn't afford to do that, then they would employ an artist when they got there. And that's the artist I want to talk about today, because he was an incredibly important, popular artist, especially with the Brits, and a very prolific painter. So he would paint the portraits. He was the person to have your portrait painted by in Rome. And his name was Pompeo Batoni. And people from England went to him, the young gentlemen from England, went to him in their droves. And so now, if you're in the US and you ever come to the UK, or anyone living here, if you go around to country homes, country estates and so on, and have a look at country houses, you are bound to find a portrait of Pompeo Batoni, by Pompeo Batoni. He had a very formulaic way of painting, and you'll spot them a mile off when you see them. And not just in England. I think there are copies of this particular painting I'm going to show you in a private collection in America. There are lots of versions of it, so whether you could actually go and see it anywhere in the States, I'm not sure. But I just want you to have a look at this portrait. So this portrait is of Edward Augustus, the Duke of York, and he was the brother of King George III. Now, he was the very first member of the English royal family to actually travel to Italy as a grand tourist. Now, when you'd done that, the name you were given was a dilettante. You were a dilettante. You'd travelled. You'd been on the grand tour. Now, Augustus, Duke of York. I mean, these grand tourists would sometimes be away for 3 and 4 years. You can imagine what travel was like in those days. However, the Duke of York was in Rome in April of 1764, so that's when we're talking about, and he sat for this portrait by Pompeo Batoni. Now, as I said, there are several versions of this painting, 2 of them in our own royal collection, I think some of them are a little bit different to each other, but the fun thing is that the Duke of York commissioned some of these paintings to send to his friends. What they would do when they had their portrait painted they'd take them home like souvenirs, like we would, and hang them on their hall wall, shall we say, so that anybody visiting this person, when they saw this painting, they would know who they were dealing with. And I'll explain that to you. So what are you looking at then? Here we are then. The Duke of York is portrayed as a confident and in-command member of the royal family. He's dressed in the uniform of a flag officer, which is a senior officer of the armed forces, and he's wearing that sash you can see across his body is the sash of the Order of the Garter, which is the most senior order of knighthood in the British honours system. On the table behind him, if you look closely there, you can see his sword and his hat. And at the left, his left hand is pointing directly to the depiction in the background of the Colosseum in Rome. Now, by choosing the costume, the props, and including the Colosseum, Battoni is leaving us in no doubt that the Duke of York is a well-respected and honoured member of the royal family, who is also well-travelled. He's a dilettante. He's been on the Grand Tour. That's what he's pointing to the Colosseum to tell us. Now, the guide that he took with him for his Grand Tour wasn't just any old tutor. It happened to be the art historian and archaeologist Johann Joachim Winckelmann, who advised the Duke on his art purchases. Now, it would seem that far from actually being a well-respected member of the royal family, the Duke of York had a reputation not just of being a bit of a philanderer, but being an enormous philanderer who was constantly in the newspapers for his bad behaviour. And Winckelmann, who obviously spent an awful lot of time with him as his guide, described the Duke as the greatest princely beast that I know, who does no honour to his rank and nation. Now, this is why Pompeo Battoni was so incredibly popular with the young English gentlemen, because he didn't portray them as they were. He portrayed them as they wanted to be seen. If you like, he was the spin doctor of his day. And very often when you see his portraits, you'll see this confident guy leaning like this, very often in full uniform of some kind, but there may be books on the table, which is telling us that the sitter is a learned man. There's likely to be a bust of the goddess Minerva, who is the goddess of wisdom, telling us that this chap is very wise. So Battoni used all these props in order to flatter his sitters, or to tell us something about his sitters. Okay, so here's the fun bit, and here's what I want you to do in the comments box below. I want you to tell me, take yourself back to the 18th century, and you've done the Grand Tour, and you land at Pompeo Battoni's studio. I want you to choose 3 things, 3 props that you want Pompeo Battoni to include in your portrait that's going to tell us something about you. What 3 things would you include in your painting? Let me tell you mine. Well, changes a lot, but let me tell you. First of all, there would have to be flowers. Flowers would have to figure somewhere. I love cut flowers, you know that, they say me. So cut flowers would have to be in there. I too would have to have books. Because I do an awful lot of reading, that says me too. I spend all my time reading. And then the third one, I think rather than have the Colosseum behind me, I'd have to be standing in front of a fire. I am a winter person, and through a window you might see a winter scene at the back of me that tells you I'm a winter person, despite the fact that I have flowers. The flowers could say nature. I like being in nature. Think about it yourself, so that if someone saw your portrait in your hall before they even met you, they'd know, oh, this person is this, and this. Can't wait to see what you put. Don't think about it too much. What 3 things would you include in your portrait? Okay, I look forward to reading those, and I'll see you next time. And until then, remember that on the Happy Stuff and Fluff, you are getting happy and growing into the very best version of you. See you next time. Bye bye.